of the Dusty, it's like, well, it's a little bit harder, but when you're this far ahead in terms of where you're playing, it gets a bit difficult. And there's your first comfort pick locked in.
I was going to say, look, they talked about it on the desk. The Aphelios is a bit of a comfort, and this is just kind of how we expected this one to go. I am excited to see this coming up from Kerberos. I was a little bit afraid that he might go back towards the Darius. We had seen it twice. It's not looked exceptionally good right now. Yes, he might love it, but that doesn't work for every single team, so they lock in the Sejuani. That's a very powerful top lane kind of duo going into there. You've got a lot of engage to kind of build around from the next few picks.
Yeah, so now you have your team fight initiation from Dusty. It's a good start. You can definitely play through the top side of the map. When it comes to mid-game, are you going to make it to mid-game, though, is the question when you're playing against LDLC, because this isn't a team which gets huge explosive leads in the way that Vitality.Bee does in terms of just hands checking you, or maybe someone like a BDS Academy playing through very strong lanes. But LDLC are kind of like this silent threat. The Sword of Damocles, if you want to use that mythological reference, where there's this sword hanging on a string. Then you reach a couple of minutes into the game, and it just string snaps, big play happens, map explodes. That's the difficulty against LDLC. So Dusty looking to pile the odds in their favor for the first couple of ultimates in the game, where potentially that could come to face each other. Again, they really are setting up shop for Teamfight Central if they lock into Sivir.
And yeah, they're going to see now with the Sivir locked in, they want to try and get themselves a good AD carry into that Aphelios. Again, it's why we've seen the Aphelios probably in the major regions fall down in priority and the Sivir rise up. Sivir does a lot of what Aphelios does, just slightly easier, slightly more safely. But with that Ahri locked in, you're now going to have a lot of pressure coming in here onto Backlund, because Backlund's, he's going to have a couple more picks now being taken away from him as they start to see what they want to put Ica into.
And not only that, you're losing your comfort picks, and Ica is, in my opinion, the best Ahri in the ERLs.
And that's a very high opinion.
I say
you're an Ahri man.
I am.
Little bird told me.
I am. Was that also just speaking in my voice? I was actually the bird. Yeah, it turns out I speak about this champion a lot, but I can't help but speak about it when it comes to LDLC's mid laner, because Ica has been that damn good. Fox on the logo, Fox in the mid lane, and you have a lot of playmaking on the top side of the map, while Execute can be not only just a safe individual AD carry scaling up as that late game insurance, but this top side of the map has so much playmaking around for LDLC to look for those big explosive fights early into the game.
And I mean, you're looking at these bans as well, the LeBlanc, the Akali, the Yasuo. These are very heavily put onto Backlund, so he's getting pushed further and further down. Again, it's what the analyst has kind of talked about. It's that, will Dusty have an answer as we come down to nearly the 5th ban into that mid lane?
And I was actually wondering whether that Zoe would come out. So now we are actually out of champions which Denvoxner has played in this tournament. Of course, he played a great many others throughout the split as well. We did mention that the Yone comes out a little bit sometimes when you've got AP junglers. When you've got the AD jungler, though, or the Wukong, does mean you're limited a little bit more. We haven't seen too much of the Victor from Backlund, but if you want a high mobility carry, it is good to go towards that Silas or Tempt in Game 3 versus Game Ward. Oh, so nearly mount a comeback win for X7 in that third game. Wasn't to be, though. Backlund going to try his hand at it against the LFL today.
And I mean, I like this as well, because the first thing you always look at when you see a Silas locked in on one side, you immediately look to the other and say, what can they grab? What can they use? Spirit Rush, very powerful. Again, that mobility you talked about, kind of moving around the map. And especially the Dominus is a really big one as well. Getting that extra tankiness to kind of put yourself in the forefront of fights and the skirmishing.
Reminds me of when you used to get the Wizard Lizard build for Renekton, where the only AP ratio in his kit is 0.1 per second on his ultimate in terms of the area around him. Silas actually gets a little bit of use out of that. In general, Silas wants ultimates which allow him to be either high utility or ones that allow him to be very, very damaging while staying alive. So stuff like Tryndamere ult, stuff like Alistar ult being very big on the on that kind of spectrum. Renekton ult fits into it too. Trundle ult, actually, speaking of that, huge to steal. I hate picking Trundle into Silas. I think this is actually a little bit awkward here for Yike. You're going to have to play out the winning jungle matchup early. Maybe you definitely can make use of that. But if you get late enough into the game and a Renekton or a Trundle or a Tamakensha goes forward and gets slapped by a Sejuani ult on top of the Silas stolen Trundle ult, things get very difficult. With the Pyke locked in for Stend, which is not something we've seen very much of, if at all. I'm trying to remember if I've actually seen Stend play this split.
I don't think he's played it at all this summer.
The first target that gets picked from LDLC is in deep trouble.
Yeah, this is the first Pyke for Stend in his career. Full stop, end of sentence. Not even just this split. So bringing out something new, and this is exactly what Yamada said on this. You play standard, you're going to lose. You got to bring out some spice. You got to bring out something else. I'm hoping that this is a pocket pick and not a G2 2019 finals.
I love this, because Stend is a hook player connoisseur. He played, I believe, something like 15 games of Nautilus in summer so far. Yes. He played so much of it. In fact, when Kasing was asked to say something positive about his finals opponent, he said, He plays Nautilus. That's what he said at that point. And this guy, Sten, in an interview with Archeron, host for the LDLC, will be appearing in the next couple of days as well.
Spoilers.
I know, crazy. Right? But Sten talked to Archeron and was saying that actually this guy wants to be in the LFL. Sten said in terms of his aspirations, he says, I want to go to a top LFL team soon. And then after that, use that as a leapfrog to get into the LEC, doing it on a flashy playmaking pick against the LFL first seed. What a way to start that off.
Well, here we are. We're going to jump straight in. But before we get into the action, don't forget to claim your August/September League of Legends monthly capsule for all of you Prime shoppers out there for your chance to get RP, Mythic Essence, skin, and more. It's so much. It's free.
It's so free.
It's free.
And sadly, not going to be a free game for Sten's Pike as much as we were talking it up. I think this is a really good explosive pick, and particularly when you've got an Aphelios Tahm Kench, the Pike being unlocked to go across the map can very much help out Dusty's early game. In spring, actually, LDLC were incredible at playing around jungle, pathing on their first couple of clears to just be around mid, and then it would be DOS roaming to mid lane to tilt these mid lane matchups, like Ahri into LeBlanc, or in this case, Ahri into Sylas. I look at how LDLC can play out this game, though, and when you've got Exakick and particularly DOS locked in lane, and it's Stend and Linsus that have the ability to impact mid, that could be a little bit of a worrying point for the LFL first seed.
I mean, you're looking at this Trundle. Trundle, the big thing with him is always going to be his early skirmishing. That pillar is so damn crazy powerful that you just had to figure out where and when you're going to be able to use it. So for me, I'm looking at this as LDLC and specifically on Yike, like you mentioned. And we'll see what they want to go for. Kerberos pushing himself in on towards this blue buff, just getting information for now and just making sure they know exactly where this Trundle is and they can get that movement then moving around the map.
Now, this is also really interesting because I was chatting to some of the LFL English casters. They're going to keep bringing up Middlecop. Rudude was another one that I talked to as well as Dom Jake. And one thing that they all unanimously said, I went out to them individually and tried to see where their stories lined up, see if they weren't pulling a fast one on me, is that what Yike does very well is on his first clear, he loves to get a ward down on enemy raptors, go into the enemy jungle and spot out the enemy jungler. He likes to be ahead in the information his team plays with in regards to jungle pathing. Him getting spotted out early does not work into that. Dusty already starting to play stylistically well around what LDLC like to do on their first clear.
And where do you want to see now? And we talked about, using the Trundle, but on the other side of that, you do have a Wukong. You actually have a very aggressive bot lane as well, but very difficult to kind of make that work against a Tahm Kench. So where do you want to see Dusty move in this early game? Where do you want to try and maybe see them set the tempo?
Well, what I'm going to do is, I'll show you on here. What I want to see is, I want to see this, and I want to see this. And everyone goes towards mid, because while it is hard to make things work into an Aphelios and Tahm Kench, if you can push in, like the Sivir wants to, and unlock this Pike, I think you can start punishing Ica if they get trying to start getting aggressive in this match. If you do take the first strike into the Sylas, it's something that we saw. I think it was Faker, the first player, to pick this up in this particular matchup, because you're into a melee. It allows you to get that first strike off very well. But later into the game, it allows you to have some more utility from the Inspiration Tree runes, rather than trying to stick towards the early burst of the Domination Tree instead. So it is going to be towards his mid lane. Lince is coming in, but Yike has path towards it. Now he's here to respond.
They're going to look to try and maybe get a flash out of him. They land, though, the abscond. Duck, one more to attack, and that's first blood going over to the side of the Wukong. The Yike is there. He's going to try and see if he can get his pillar down, but he's got to be careful because the red buff is still very powerful, and you might be able to get on top of him. He takes a tower shot, he flashes, he takes another! And all was so good, but it ends up in tears. Still a 1-for-1.
Oh, that is heartbreaking, and I feel it for Backlund. Backlund, who was so good in the NLC in summer, has a chance to make a game-changing play. The first kill already goes down. That's great, but Dusty overplay their hand. Yike did path towards mid, manages to get something out of it. Dusty's bot lane now playing out a harder trade towards bot lane, but we did talk about that mid lane. A lot of ability to go in towards this very swingy matchup early on. And it is a good angle from Backlund and Linsus. They find the angle, and you know that Ica is going to be pushing up in the Ahri level 3, level 2, and you get the priority from Ahri, but it's just a bit of an overestimation after this point.
Yeah, it feels like, yes, you got away from Yike, and you can see that they almost have an idea here, but this here not landing onto Yike and landing onto a minion, meaning that he's able to flash, you're not able to get the final auto attack. It's just unfortunate. It means that all that hard work isn't undone, but it's definitely feeling a little bit worse. The Gravitum gun, not going to be used to keep Stend in place, and this is where the matchup gets a little bit hard, and that's what I was saying, is again, you can't really make this trade kind of stick onto this Aphelios Tahm Kench. You need to be moving that Pike around the map. And actually, Den Boxon lost his flash.
Yeah, I guess we came back into that out of the replay. So, bot side, obviously not going completely right as right. It's not going to likely explode, but top side, Renekton's got prio. Renekton gets to mess with the enemy jungler, and this is the follow-on effect of Backland dying, actually, in that mid-jungle TV2. If they stay alive, you get to push in that extra wave, get a little bit more prio, get to teleport back with maybe slightly more than just the boots and the Dark Seal after that point. When, of course, Dark Seal, one of my favorite items in the game, especially if you start stacking that one up. But dying at that point, at the end of that 2v2, means that this follow-on effect happens, but LDLC are so punishing. That is what we know that this team to be. You make one mistake, they look at it and they say, right, we can play out the next 5 minutes in these steps. And after that death, they manage to push into the enemy jungle, take some advantage away from it, and you're starting to see, actually, Lince is getting forced away from his own camps and having to contest on the other side of the map.
Yeah, he's going to try to. Does have push into the bot lane and, of course, in mid now as well. You can see the backlane actually doesn't have the push. He's just given up on the wave and just said, all right, I'm here. I'll help you out. You gave a kill over, and I'll try and help you here. But again, it's very difficult because the longer you stay in that kind of extended position in the enemy jungle, the more you're losing out on the rest of the map. So they back away. They just want to try and reset these lanes, get their first backs off, and try and make something work maybe around this Rift Herald in 2 minutes' time, where that's where we generally see the first fights happening for both these teams.
Yeah, and you do have a lot of very strong level 6 ultimates on both sides, of course. You got Renekton. Even before Renekton started moving towards slightly more tanky builds and stuff like that, the one reason I would kind of reconcile with teams picking Renekton, because let's be honest, it's been a bit of a controversial pick over time, is that it does win you Herald fights a lot, because you get to have, particularly if you're attacking the Herald, you get to keep stack up autos, get 2 empowered abilities around that Herald fight. Things get very dangerous after this point, and now you've got a game with the Renekton, the Trundle, and the Ahri, so much ability to pick and to do tons of damage to the first damage into the fight, but Dusty, not without their own tools to fight as well, particularly Wukong and, well, I mean, both top sides really willing to fight around that point.
We've got a recall coming in now here for Ragnar as he just pick up that Iron Spike Whip, so going towards the Gore Drinker build. Maybe actually going for the slow one actually instead, but generally speaking, you do see the Gore Drinker or the
Stride Breaker.
Stride Breaker, yes, that's the one. That's the one I was thinking of, but not to be anything more aggressive than that. We will see Exakick and Doss just doing their due diligence and moving themselves around the map, making sure they're clearing as much vision as possible not to get caught out by a potential Cyclone that Linces should have available to him very soon. Yeah,
okay, so interesting stuff around here, because obviously Lince is ready to fight. Exakick almost very ready to fight as well. He's going to switch over to Calibrum after the Gravitum ends up dying here, and then actually in this weapon rotation, you get Green-White, which is your rifle turrets, Calibrum Crescendo, into your Severum after that point. He's ready to fight on bot side. Top side is ready to fight as well. Kerberos, no flash, of course.
Yeah, no flash, but he is slowing them down. He's still very tanky, so gets the ultimate out of Ragnar, does have to expend his own, still has TP for Kerberos and the Ignite as well, so we shouldn't lose too much to this tower. Needs to be careful, though, because they just hit level 6 onto the Trundle, so we'll have availability to the ultimate. Now we're seeing bot lane again. It's very difficult. If you don't land that hook here or Stend, it's very much you're losing that trade because the Sivir takes time, she takes items.
Yeah, and what that also means in terms of losing or winning the trade in the bot CV2 is that actually, while we did see Stend making some looks towards the mid lane, Herald's up and Pyke didn't get out of lane early. The Herald is now spawned, Kerberos is back in lane, LDLC not taking early advantages to that point. As we say this now, you can see that Stend is making the way up there on that mini-map. See how these teams want to go about dealing with that, one of those first big objectives of the game.
Well, it looks like LDLC want to try and start off this Rift Herald, but Dusty not to be outdone just yet. Kerberos has been subjugated, which means he loses all his resistances and gains a hell of a lot more over to Yike. As we're going to see the Cyclone coming in. Kerberos keeps himself alive for as long as he can, and that's a trade of 1 for 1. You don't have Dominus here for Ragnar, which means he has to flash over, but he's followed, and the red buff, one more Q, and he should be able to get him, but he's underneath the tower. One last hit of the stick, and that's Dusty coming out with a 2 for 1.
And while you may have some of these big names, Yike and Ragnar on the top side of the map, it's Linces who strikes back on the bot side, 2-2 bot.
Oh, he does get the Devour out of him, but you can see, though, look at the shielding coming out. You have red and white, which means that Dusty do not want to fight. So meaning a lot of healing, a lot of short-term damage coming out, but they're gaining a little bit of momentum. You can see LDLC, they're not looking as comfortable as maybe we thought they would.
Yeah, no, and these are a couple of overestimations in what they can do in these first couple of fights in the game. Now, you don't have the Dominus at this point. You don't have double empowered abilities because the extra rage you comes through when you pop that one. Ragnar does end up doing enough damage at the first point, but this Wukong is one of the strongest champions in the game at fighting around Herald fights at the same kind of point in time. And Linces gets that double Cyclone, gets to stack up with the Conqueror, and does so much damage that it clears out the top side 2v2.
And this is a big moment at 3-0 on the Wukong. Gonna have a Divine Sunderer very soon. It's a big item power spike, maybe for a potential Dragon, potential Rift Herald fight, because again, as much as that was a fight around the Rift Herald, we haven't seen a fight for the Rift Herald just yet, so still waiting to see now where this first kind of objective that's gonna crack open the game. It's incredibly close to on the gold. Thankfully for the side of LDLC, despite them being a kill down, they do have CS leads.
Yeah, that's the big thing, right? You have a dominant 1v1 in top side, and TV2 extra kick on their eponymous champion of that Aphelios. That champion has been so tightly tied to this player's name and has himself pretty much just an organic advantage down on that bot side. Saw that the dive didn't quite work out, but even with that, we do now have to zoom away from that bot lane. Bot lanes are coming towards us. Mid lane, Sivir sat down farming, taking away that wave at least, as we're going to see actually a trade between the Herald and the Dragon. Dusty not in position to fight this after Cyclones is down from that earlier fight, and Herald goes to LDLC, Dragon over to Dusty.
And I like this play from Dusty. You don't have the Cyclone, at least not for another couple of seconds. You didn't really have any kind of, position to try and contest that. So
is that in trouble here?
Keep this bot lane. No, I don't think he's in trouble. Maybe not so just yet. He just have dash, so he's just kind of keeping everyone honest, making sure they can't get a shortcut back to the lane. But again, Dusty trading equally enough here, as we do have Kerberos finishing up the first mythic of the game.
So the thing is, I looked at it, I was like, if you got Gravitum there and you get the root, Pyke isn't really known for taking damage when he's locked in place. A little bit worried about that point. Of course, it wasn't in that weapon combination at that point, but Dusty at least managing to get themselves those very powerful Dragon stats at this point. Man, Dragon, one of the strongest individual stacks in the game. It's 9% resistive stats at this point, and that allows people like Kerberos to be very, very tanky towards the top side. Taking off Kerberos.
There was a flash there for the Trundle. Yike just gets himself out, but that Arctic Assault lands with the Spirit Rush being stolen by Backland. Again, so I haven't really seen him kind of get out of this lane. Very difficult for him too, as you can see he's 20 CS down, but could have been a very different story there for the LDLC jungler. And again, Dusty, again, I've got to give credits to them. Yes, this game is very much only in its infancy right now, but it is definitely not the same kind of level that we expected to see. Dusty do seem to be a bit more comfortable in these first early stages. It's the next 10 minutes that's going to really tell the tale.
So while it is great to see, particularly as myself, I'm
a premium seller of
I'm just
Hopium.
like, wow, yesterday was pretty unceremonious when you saw Game Ward really just run X7 through. They didn't have that much fight up until that third game. Dusty already fighting blow for blow in some of these early fights. You can see a couple of, actually the ult thrown out from Execute just to poke at the turret, but even with this, Dusty have themselves a better position than maybe we gave them credit for in game one. But LDLC, all it takes is one play for them to just open up the map. That's what you're waiting for. You're always waiting for that string attached to that sword hovering above your head to snap, for them to take the game over at that point. See, actually, lane allocation turning out a little bit differently. Backland coming down to this bot side, helping take this one out just as Sivir resets and goes back towards mid. Lane allocation switched up from Dusty.
Yeah, we actually got to see a bit of an early Oblivion Orb coming out here for Ica, so he's not going to be in the same kind of power spike of getting that mythic item first. It makes sense, you are into a Silas, but you do now have a bit of an item disparity coming in here for Dusty, where they have got an advantage. They are going to be able to kind of get those rotations off and maybe start a fight on their own terms.
Well, that's why I kind of mentioned the lane allocation, right? Because if you suddenly have Silas going back towards bot lane, I mean, Ari has itemized for that Silas 1v1. No one else is really getting the same kind of level of regen, and you need to make sure the Ari's in the sideline at that point to get the most out of it. Dusty, with the payoff to this, going to get Denvoxnate with a plate in mid. Might have to pop the ult here. Yike getting the pillar.
He's waiting though, he's baiting, and he's going to look to try and make this one work. Jumping onto Ica, there's going to be a spell shield that doesn't really do a lot, but they haven't really landed anything onto the AD carry. Denvoxnate does lose a hell of a lot of HP, as does the Dusty jungler, but nobody goes down, so you get a couple of ultimates here and there, but nothing of too much worth being lost. But with the Rift Herald being dropped in mid lane, no wave there, so going to be able to get the 2 plates and nothing more, I imagine.
It's going to be got a gold. Is Ica going to be in range for it? He is. So an extra 160 gold to Ica and Yike, both. Shout out the 320 between the two of them. But Dusty get themselves a plate, lose 2 in return, and against Game Ward in their group stage, actually, they had some issues when things got to this point in the game in terms of, okay, our bot lane is now parked in the mid lane, what do we do? And they made some mistakes. They overextended and a jungler would come into lane, something like that. That was where they found a lot of difficulties. Kerberos finding some difficulties up here on the top side, Renekton continuing to take heavy trades.
Yeah, you got the Gore Drinker, even with the Frostfire Gauntlet, you're just going to be able to stick onto it. This is the point of the matchup, though, where even with Kerberos with the Ignite, he doesn't have kill pressure. Ragnar, even with the Renekton getting up to level 11, not really going to have kill pressure. That's just going to be a wet noodle fight up in top side, where they're constantly threatening unless someone else comes to party, and unless you get a second player joining the team
Player
on
two
either
is
side.
into the game.
Yeah, honestly, here in comes a new challenger. But Again, very slow to start off this one. It's little eklings of advantages coming out for LDLC, yes, but they got the Rift Herald from it, so that's that plate kind of advantage.
That'd be like if League was like an arcade game, just plug in an extra control.
Cool.
The thing is, there we go.
Yeah, and
see, for me, I always thought that League was actually, particularly for a top player, especially against stuff like Nocturne, it's actually a horror survival game. It's like, wow, how do I survive in this laning phase?
Nocturne's ult is my favorite named ult because it does exactly what it says. Paranoia. You're paranoid.
Hang on. So it's not Teemo's move quick.
No, no, because it's paranoia. It describes what happens in the game when he pops it. It's amazing.
I think my personal favorite is Bear Trap on a rope from Pled. That one, it just gets me. It just gets me. And we're getting DOS, forcing the flash away, but nothing more than that. You can see Dusty content to play around control tower in this mid lane, just try and brute force priority here with multiple members, and then allow them some extra angles into the rest of the map. And this time they find something for them.
Right, we're coming up. 20 seconds till Dragon spawns. It looks like Dusty are going to be the ones set up for that particular objective. No Rift Herald for another minute. So how do you want to try and approach this as both sides? Dusty, obviously, the first one's here, but how do LDLC, do they just want to leave it? Do they want to try and go for the lanes? What's their plan?
Well, so what I want to see is what's going to happen with this mid lane priority, and then also I want to see what's going to happen with, one, this Trundle ult over here, and two, what's going to happen with Backland stealing that Trundle ult. Keep an eye on those. I like using those things. Either way, that's what I'm looking for. First target into the fray is going to get those resistances shredded, and once that first kill goes down, the fight's going to snowball after that point. Let's see where it starts here.
Here we go. Yike is there, but you can see Backland on the backside, doing his namesake a good service, but you still have Ike there. There's the on the hunt. They're away from the Sivir. They don't quite land the Glacial Prison, and that's going to stop really any kind of advancement onto this fight.
But that pillar was absolutely pixel perfect. Stops Sejuani getting just that little bit closer, getting towards the Aphelios, out of range from the Sejuani ult. Of course, there was a Tahm-Kench Devour right next to them, but still, Dusty losing ultimates, not getting that much for it. LDLC playing out better in the micro.
Now LDLC a priority, and honestly, without the on the hunt and just not really feeling confident to stay there, you don't really have the greatest of kind of setups or engages coming out here from Dusty, so LDLC will get their prize from basically just surviving. They just have better item spikes, they have better champions at this point in the game.
And they outplayed, right? Because if you have Dusty actually landing that Sejuani ult, and suddenly you don't have the extra amount of disengage, suddenly the second person that gets picked is eaten up by a Sylas with the correct ult on them. DOS stopped by the Ricochet. I was wondering if that was going to lead to anything more, but not to be at this point. But yeah, LDLC, seriously, that pillar around that last fight, saving them a lot of blushes from that. Yike coming in clutch.
Yeah, and we can see now Yike getting that dragon, get himself back onto the map, and they're going to be already starting up this Rift Herald. You can see that Dusty don't want to give this one over. They're already starting to rotate their bot lane, but they're just a little bit too late. I don't think they're going to be able to contest it, especially because Backland's lost his ult. He doesn't have the Spirit Rush.
See what's happening here.
They're going to look for it. LDLC confirm it. There's the charm coming down onto the Wukong. They'll land onto the Ahri and then turn straight back onto DOS, who doesn't have flash. But look at Ragnar just tearing through this backside. It's a great front-to-back team fight for LDLC, and you can see Ike is just tearing them apart. Nothing they can do on the side of Dusty, and they are finally been cracked open. It was close right until it wasn't.
Oh, LDLC, you just have to wait. The string snaps, the sword falls. Dusty falling by the wayside just like that. LDLC, they find their explosive fight like we know they always do.
And again, this is what we talked about. If it comes to the kind of mid-game point, you take this kind of a fight, you're just going to get hand stiffed.
And this is when you have level 11 Renekton. You've got the first empowered ability there, second ability coming through as well. You don't want to be sat there as a Sylas or a Wukong or as a Pyke as well. No one can perform the front line unless Kerberos is in the correct position. And LDLC forced the issue. It's not like Dusty can regather themselves after that point. You're still waiting on the severe damage. A lot of your other damage dealers can't go into that Renekton at that point, and Dusty, they choose to go for that fight and they get punished.
Yeah, and again, out of nowhere, 4,000 gold lead just off those kills. You've got a Magi Soul Stealer second item for Ike.
Lovely.
Knew you'd be happy about that one.
I didn't see it. Thank you for...
No problem. Yeah. See, I just care about Ahri a lot more than you do, so I look out for these things. That's just how it is. But
well, hang on. After watching a whole year of European Ahris,
see, I was blessed. I got LPL
yeah,
so I was like, hell
some
yeah.
good ones there. And I'd say LFL has some really good players. Oh, no, well, not like this. No!
No! Lose the stacks, Ike! There's nowhere for you to go! And you have just, as I draw attention to it, you lose all of those stacks, and that book is useless. It has nothing in it. Nothing!
I am really sad.
I know you are, I can tell.
I was just about to say, European Aries, they've kind of been a bit hit or miss, but the LFL ones are really good. And
that one got hit.
that one got hit by everything under the sun, blows the stopwatch as well. And this is another thing, right? Actually, when you're sat with Ari build, you don't really have the luxury of building towards utility a lot of the time. You have to build very efficiently because you're not a champion with very high damage. So when you sit on something like a stopwatch, you're sat there and like, okay, I'm going to sit on this, not build the full zones, and just use it in one important fight, and that'll tide me over to my next big item completion. Losing that actually takes a lot of power out of LDLC's mid laner, and of course, as you're saying, that Medjai's out of pocket as well. Dusty looking to force the issue afterwards.
Exit kick, he does get devoured, so Dosh should be able to keep him alive. It was a little bit dicey there because there was no summoners there onto the Aphelios, but again, so difficult to really stick onto this Aphelios when the Tahm Kench is always on hand to turn him around.
Yeah, Dusty overforcing a couple of times now, not quite hitting their mark with their own aggressive engages with Sivir ult popped, and LDLC with the disengage of Tahm Kench W, Tahm Kench Devour, the pillar coming through as well. They found themselves enough degree of safety to allow them to play through side lanes at the same time. Because actually, Ragnar has a significant gold lead now, is starting to control those side lanes, and Ari still able to push in waves very, very effectively, roam to the play first, even if they are laning up against Backland. So Dusty, when they don't manage to land those engages very importantly onto that mid lane, LDLC are finding smaller advantages across the map at the same time.
It's only a 4,000 gold lead, Dragon apiece, next one up in 45 seconds. It is in Cloud Soul, and before the patch changes onto the Souls, that wouldn't have been a big deal, but now you're looking at the likes of a Trundle, an Ari, a Renekton, these things that very much want to try and keep on your face, and that extra movement speed is massive.
Especially because I count 1, 2, 3, 4 melee champions down there, haphazardly posted across the that champion scoreboard. But if you're playing against a Cloud Soul, where actually the slow resist comes in really important, actually the movement speed comes in really important too, these melees from Dusty are going to struggle to shut down their targets and struggle to disengage from these targets at the same point if the fight starts going sour. So Cloud Soul, very important were that to come to be. A little way off that first though, 1 dragon apiece. It's not like we've got ourselves an early soul, which means that we're going to have to see a couple more fights first before that gets decided.
Well, no one actually set up around this dragon just yet. It looks like Dusty kind of recognizing, hey, LDLC went maybe a little bit too late to make that rotation up top side, so they're going to be able to get themselves a second dragon. This is not bad for Dusty whatsoever. I'm still holding my breath about a potential win condition on it, but it does mean that LDLC won't be able to get access to that soul for an extra 5 minutes. We might see Yike. Is he going to be a Yanks? No, he's not going to go for it. He's going to stick himself there. But he thought about it.
You can't afford to die at that point. Because I'm sat there like, why not? Maybe I would have done that. Maybe you would have done that at home as well.
That's why LPL have 3 of the 4 last World Championships.
Yeah, but the problem is,
willing to go
if you die, there's this thing up, which is just on your screen as well. It's called Baron Nashor. You need your jungler around, really, to contest that. And Dusty would have absolutely reveled in the opportunity to relish the opportunity. That's the word.
They can revel in it.
Yeah, I guess they could.
Like the sweet. Gotta keep in your toes. You gotta be prepared for when you cast with me. You gotta make sure you're ready for what kind of curveballs are gonna. They're not gonna make sense. You just gotta be prepared. But looks like LDLC are prepared. They're putting themselves into position around this Baron, as we do see a pretty good pillar here. As ooh, was that extra kick's ult? It was. They thought they actually caught out the Wukong, so you do not have the Moonlight Vigil.
No, you don't. But I think Dusty is still going to struggle to force fight. So I think LDLC, I think it's right for them to look for those kind of players because they don't have to fully commit to them, right? You are the longer range composition. You have abilities to engage without really throwing your bodies into the fray at the same time. So if it doesn't quite hit, that's fine. You just go for it again when your cooldowns are back up. You're still winning in side lanes. Ragnar winning across the rest of the map. And Dusty, they don't really have anything more to say about this either. Everyone drawn towards the top side of the map. And Yike going again.
Yeah, Backland, he's going to steal away the Ari ultimate and try and just keep himself alive. The Subjugate and the Ignite was used. Actually, Flash and Heal used by Exekick. He was left on his own as DOS went aggressive. And now we're going to see Dusty going aggressive. That's a 4-man Cyclone into the knockback. They're going to get Exekick into the mouth. But he's dragged right back. You've caught yourself a fish. And now LDLC, they are scattering back. They got to scramble to make sure they do not die.
Lensis on this Wukong is doing a lot of work. What's happening in the spot side? I mean, doesn't look like it's actually ended up in a kill, but still, Dusty punishing LDLC at their second time of looking for the less committal on these engages. They just about get Backland out alive, and Dusty come around with the counter engage after that point. We are seeing Dusty being able to at least read some of these plays, bite back, and though LDLC are in the advantage, they are winning through side lanes, and they have themselves some points of power coming up very, very shortly, especially with the Phalios nearing 3 items before that Xavier with a huge gold lead individually. Dusty are still finding ways to hold them to account.
I mean, you're looking at the items as well. Still 0 stacks on that Medjai's for Ica. So it's basically just taking up a spot right now, not really giving himself a huge amount of benefit.
I'll have you know it's giving a mythic passive of 5 ability haste from the Leandris.
I stand by my point. But again, like, you know, you're matched in items in topside, you're matched in jungle, you're matched in AD carry. Bar, like, you know, a pickaxe for a BF sword's not going to be that big of a difference, despite there being a 1,500 gold lead for the Aphelios. So this isn't a terrible situation for Dusty, and because you have something like a Pike, getting vision control around areas is going to be an awful lot better with the Umbral Grave.
And I think the important thing in regards to following on from, okay, well, look at these item spike comparisons, blah, 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 you still have enough damage to kill the first target. And that's what they're looking to do on this boss side.
That is their first target. They're trying to see if they can maybe make this one work, put Ragnar down. And this is where the matchup gets a little bit scary here for Ragnar. Yes, he was a monster. He was the crocodile that was able to take down anybody. But now that boar is getting pretty big, and we're starting to hit winter all of a sudden. Crocodiles are cold-blooded creatures, and they don't do well with the cold.
No, a little bit lethargic in that matchup. It's not like you got yourself a Blade of the Ruin King as well to chunk through them. This is going towards the more short-range bruisery kind of competition. But Dusty actually going for an engage.
There's a 3-man Cyclone in there. They're going to try and jump down on top of him. But again, DOS with the ultimate means they can't get on top of him. Ragnar is trying to get on the Den box net, jumps straight on top of him, flashes in, gets the slides, gets the dice, but he's isolated. It's going to be an Ica, but no! Ragnar falls down. Ica has the flash away, and look at Backlund thinking about re-engaging on top of this. Exekick needs to be very careful. He has no summoners and there's no Devour. With a minute until Dragon. This game's starting to momentum, Nymera. It's starting to feel a bit shifty.
Dusty are decisive on the engage. While they're taking that mid lane out of turret, I was a little bit worried, so thinking, okay, Den Voxnay's not there when you start that fight, but Linces has a heck of a lot of gold in his own right as well. Black Cleaver, Divine Sunderer, the ability to fall. Exekick is also not within DPS range too. Den Voxnay gets a little bit of an awkward exit from this fight, but just already from this, you've got a lot of different members from LDLC not in prime position either. Dusty saying, well, okay, maybe we're not in the best position ourselves, but we're in a damn sight better position than you. You just about get away with the 1 kill and manage to disengage.
Well, looks like LDLC
right weapons for the Baron Rush.
Might be done with this right now, and there's going to be a blue trinket going down, so we know what's happening, but can they get over the wall? The TP's going to be coming in. LDLC, do you want to try and flip this? Look at the pink wards, the panic, as everyone from that Dusty just goes, quick, just get us vision.
Yeah, but even in the group stage, Dusty got taken down. Well, against it was Matchco, I believe, in their very first game of the group stage. We were casting that one. Even Matchco, the team from the PG Nationals, who had a difficult time in the group stage. They snuck a Baron versus Dusty. Not to be done again. Dusty see the weapons coming up. They managed to disengage.
Well, Dragon is still up, but it looks like LDLC don't really want to try and force it just yet. We will see the Q come in. There's a flash in. There's a Cyclone down. And that's the Devour having to use. Ragnar can't really get his damage down. Has to go golden. As we see a great Cyclone coming in. They're going to try and make this one work as a trade of top laners comes out. It's Ragnar for Kerberos. But look at the moves now. Devox is a little bit isolated, but he's putting out damage onto Ica. And Yike has to run away as well. Dusty are turning the momentum of these fights. They have the help bars. They can turn for Dragon.
And it is once again the first time we've really seen both teams look for that first target and snowball it off of it. Enough stopwatches are there from LDLC to stop something like a Pike ult reset coming through. But even in that fight, you can see the damage starting to come through from Dusty. LDLC, they're getting a little bit overextended, and particularly with their use of the Devour, it's not on the prime target. They're having to use it suboptimally, which is allowing Dusty some angles into the fight.
And Yike, he's a bit overextended. Needs to be careful as he just gets a blast cone over the wall. And again, just trying to threaten the vision around the backside of this. But I love what Dusty are doing. They're not overcommitting into the river. They're just saying, look, as long as we can see the big purple worm and we know there's no vision behind us, we're golden.
Yeah, and lest we forget, these are two teams which are actually first seed from their region. Now, I know during the pre-show and a lot of our broadcasts as well, because it's kind of the truth, right? A lot of us were very hopeful about X7 because they played so well in their group stage. With Dusty coming in as first seed from the NLC, giving the LFL first seed something to think about. It's a messy fight once again, though. Particularly, Exekick and Ica aren't really in threat unless they choose to be. And Ica kind of uses the HP as a resource. It's something that you tend to do on these high mobility AP assassins from the mid lane. But even with that, you can see that it is the front lines which are being given this very hard task of trying to survive versus the pick of both teams.
Nymera have Very unfortunate news for you.
Oh, the book's been...
It's been sold. It's given to charity. He only had two pages in it, 2 stacks, so it's been given to charity. He got a nice hat, though.
Oh, that's
Very nice hat.
I wonder if it's made out of paper.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it has a little bit more...
Magi's head warmer.
Just sounds like you put the book on your head and you're like,
That's what you do when like it's raining when you come back from the library. I don't know, whatever. Yeah. Like that. But either way, when it rains...
I love how you tried to come... Oh! Yeah, he's going to have to flash. I was going to say Sten didn't really need to be there at that point. He was being a bit over-aggressive, trying to get some vision down, but does lose his flash of it. Not the biggest thing in the world.
No. One thing I do want to pay attention to, actually, is just going to put the little circle thing down there. Look at that vision score. Because you got this thing called Numbered Glaive, which allows you to control a lot of this vision. Now, we haven't seen as much, say, Senna with Umbral Glaive. We used to see Graves a lot with it too, but the Pike coming out here. See how important that is for this, because actually, let's have a look at that vision control if we can talk about that. What has that vision control led to? You have some wards down. Of course, you got this one down here, but even with that, LDLC, they don't have the best ways to kind of take a multi-angle team fight if they so wish, because Ragnar and the Renekton, sometimes you are going to struggle to find the targets that you want to. We saw how powerful they could be around those Herald fights when they get right into the backline, but Dusty making sure they are playing in the fog of war, making sure LDLC don't have any information that they don't want them to have.
And it's coming down to execution. It's about a 2,500 gold lead. It's not really that much as it comes down to later stages. You even see it actually, despite a 1,500 gold lead in the top side. Ragnar's actually an item just about equaling out right there. Gets himself the GA on the next back, but you have the Anathema's Chain, so you've got yourself a way of just kind of mitigating that damage. Kerberos is super tanky. He doesn't need to be super relevant in a side lane. He just needs to make the engage happen.
I'm really interested who that Anathema's Chain is going to be on.
Most likely Exekick.
Typically, well, see if it's used in this fight.
Ragnar does end up getting himself down to about half HP. He's going to lose that GA as quick as he bought it. That is not extremely good value for money as he tries to go back in on top of this one. This is good for Den Voxna, though, because he's just going front to back. He's just putting in damage. You can see him. No one's really threatening a fight. He gets flashed on, and Ragnar finds one, but the ricochet on the backside gets 2 more, and 3 for 1. Dusty have survived the mid game, and they're well into the late.
It is scrap after scrap, and it is finally a haymaker to the face from Dusty against the French Titans. They take a winning fight in the mid lane, and while they have been behind the entirety of this game, LDLC continually pushing them, continually dragging them on the side lanes. It is Dusty that win the biggest fight of the game so far, and it comes with a Baron for their favor.
Does it, though? We're going to see if they maybe want to try and contest. The Exekick is huge right now. They're going to jump onto him. He's the target. He flashes away, but you don't have exactly the same kind of luxury here for Dots, and he will go down. The Baron still gets to kind of go for this one here, but you've got Yike maybe coming back onto the map, but no, he's going nowhere near this. They know it's a suicide mission, and that is going to be Dusty with the Baron. Dusty equaling out the gold lead, and Dusty alive in this game.
And you know what? I have never been so happy to be wrong, because this on paper, and especially with yesterday's games taken in mind as well, was looking like another LFL Overdog matchup. Now, this is game 1, but this is still a hell of a competition being put out by Dusty. They're finally edging up towards a gold lead, actually slightly behind even still, but they have themselves Soul Point. There's a Dragon coming up in a minute. They have item break points being hit across the board. We've been keeping track of that across the game, and Dusty, though they come in as the team looking to be underdogs as well. I mean, they were very much considered underdogs coming into this one. Game 1 looking a lot closer than a lot of people gave them credit for.
And I think the big thing from LDLC is that it's down to execution, and it's being forced. It's not as if it's unforced errors. Dusty are pushing them to say, look, you have to use the Devour onto Yike. You have to use the Spirit Rush defensively to try and get away from our engage rather than offensively to get onto our backline. Ragnar's kind of playing this flash onto the Sivir. If he doesn't have flash like he does it now,
okay, let's
very
have a look
difficult
at what's
to get
happening with this Ahri. Ahri's actually on the backline.
Oh, they're going to look for him. They do get the stun down onto the Aphelios, so Exekick not really doing the damage. Moonlight Vigil is good. Ike flashes in, but he's dead. That's Kerberos for Ike. It's a 1-for-1 trade. I don't think you really have the damage to go back into this, but you've got the Chakrams, no more. Now into a Fernum, into a Scythe as well, so Exekick not with ideal guns. This is Soul. If they want to try and go for it, they're going to try maybe 50-50 it. Stens doesn't quite go down just yet. It will be forfeited over. As you can see, Exekick just keeping everybody away, knowing how big he can be. Backlund steals away to Devour, and everyone's just trying to run away. Yike! Ooh, not quite caught out just yet. You got to be careful, Backlund. You're so very low. That Trundle Pillar could have been the death of Dusty. The Dragon goes over to LDLC, as does the fight, and we're going to see if they can maybe make something else happen here. You still got to be careful, though, Yike. That's still a massive sipper.
Oh, both of these teams so ready to scrap, so ready to commit to these fights. So we are seeing now Exakick on there. Real iconic champion of the FLS being so strong. We spent a lot of summer looking at Zeri, looking at Sivir, but the FLS has come back from spring. Always so dangerous to look at when they get to these big items. Look at the damage that goes on the pipe. You really can't afford to get caught.
I mean, you can't afford to get caught, but looks like Yike has, and they're going to try and burn him down before the time Kench can get there. The Catfish does not let you do that backline. No flash, nowhere to go. Does have a Zhonya's, but he's isolated. They can't really do a lot to help him, as Ragnar just sits in front of him and says, no, you shall not pass. And all of a sudden, it was all looking so great, Nightmare, and they haven't finished the race. They still need to get to the finish line.
No, they never actually managed to get that gold lead. They managed to get that Baron in the big fight which led up to it, but they haven't been able to explode that after this point. Dusty now looking to defend this top side, looking for a pick. There's a lot of LDLC members waiting for them.
Don't have a lot of engage though here as Dusty. You're kind of waiting for a great Cyclone to come in onto Exakick, and that's exactly what they're going to go for. They're going to try and burn him down, but he's got himself a stopwatch. They're not going to get the Boomerang Blade or the ultimate, but it doesn't matter. Shut down, taken out, and they'll get Ragnar as well. Kerberos comes out big. They even kill off Ica at the end, and Dusty not to be outdone. LDLC stayed too long and they got bitten back.
It is a game of overstays and these tricky angles. Both of these teams so ready to fight now. Yike getting run down.
He's getting run down, but is he going to be able to stay alive? The tower didn't even need minions, and now they could run down topside. They can end the game.
You have staggered death time as 50 seconds on Yike. Exakick will be alive. That is the saving grace of LDLC. But Dusty, they take one turret, they take two turrets. How much more comes after this?
You see, they're going to go for the inhibitor. Those death timers not as long, 15 seconds, but they're keeping the minion wave alive. Sten gonna not lose his GA just yet. Dusty, do you overcommit? Do you try and make it work? It looks like they do. Doss is gonna lose his GA, or excuse me, his status. And that's going to be the stopwatch broken. They're going to look for it. They have the minions. And Dusty looking to make this one work. The Cyclone's already back, but they don't need it. It's Dusty taking the lead over LDLC.
Doubters be damned. NLC takes another game off of LDLC.